Anish,
Sir, am I audible?
you are the presenter for this roll number 1 to 30. Yeah, I am clear to you.
Yes, sir.
I am audible to you.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So, roll number 1 to 30, Anish. Roll number 24 is the presenter. For roll number 31 to 60, Bhavya is the presenter. For roll number 61 to 90, Kirti Sethi is the presenter. For roll number 91 to 110, Pragya will present. And for roll number 150, guys, roll number is for 1 to 150, Surbat. Roll number 149, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please tell your name.
Sir, it's Subrat
Not
Jain.
clear.
Sir, it's Subrat Jain. Subrat Jain.
Subrat Jain. Okay, okay. Okay. And last presenter is Vishal Soni.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
164. Who will represent this group 151 to 169 onwards. 151 onwards to 169. Vishal Soni. 164.
Yes, sir.
He will be the last presenter. So let's start our SDL discussion. So this is the PPT forwarded by all you students or representatives. So first we go in sequence. So first roll number 24, Anish will present, and it will describe introduction, morphology, and biochemical reactions and virulence factors. So, Anish,
Yes,
are
sir,
you
am I
ready?
audible?
Yes, you are audible. So, bache, start. I think more than how many students are there. So,
Yes. Do you know the most
120.
deadliest?
Yes,
Sir, can I start?
yes.
Do you know the most deadliest disease that the mankind has ever faced? Yes, it is plague, also known as Black Death. Today, I, Anish Style, roll number 24, and I'm going to discuss the topic plague on the behalf of my group 1 to 30. I'm going to begin with the interesting question that why plague is also known as Black Death. I'll be giving 10 seconds to answer. Time starts now. Time over. Plague is known as Black. And was answering.
Yeah, what I was telling is that the post after the infection, the patient would be some patients develop black pigmentation of the skin, so maybe that's why.
It is not exactly right, but nice try, Pragya. Thank you. Plague is known as Black Death. Yes, Kriti.
Can I try, Anish?
Yes, yes.
What happens basically is there is a lot of involvement of the blood vessels, which leads to hemorrhages in the skin and the mucosa, which will result in the gangrene, and the gangrene appears black. So I guess that is why it is referred to as the Black Death.
Nice try, but Kriti, what I have read is the plague is known as Black Death because in this the lymph node become black and swollen.
Yes, you are right, bache. Actually, massive involvement of blood vessels are there, which leads to hemorrhages. No. Reason is quite different. Reason is अभी जो स्टूडेंट फीमेल स्टूडेंट ने बताया है, जब वह बेसिकली
Sir, you are not audible. Uh, but I am getting that the reason which Kriti said is right. Pardon me for my inaccuracy. So we have dissected our topic in 5 headings. Number 1, introduction, then morphology, culture, biochemistry, and at the last, virulence factors. Sir, next slide, please. Sir, next slide, please. Sir, you are not audible. No. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Hello. Sorry.
Sir, your voice
PPT.
is breaking a lot.
Oh, now you are audible. Hello. Now I am audible or not?
Yes, sir, now you are audible.
Hello. Okay, please start your presentation. Anish,
Sir, PPT
start
is
your
not visible.
presentation. PPT is not visible. Okay, wait. I'm showing. Now it is visible. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay, start your presentation, please. So we were discussing about little bit about introduction of plague. So now, Anish, please.
Yes, sir. So let us begin with the introduction of plague. You all must be eager to know that what is this deadly organism? Well, it is a bacteria known as Yersinia pestis. Three important questions which we have to face in boards. Number one, who is its vector? Who is its reservoir or natural host? And how does it cause infection in humans? For this, let us imagine a tiny little rat which is infected with plague. When this rat is bitten by a rat flea, then this rat flea can accidentally bite a human and cause infection in human. So it is a zoonotic infection which is usually transmitted by rat flea. So the three questions which we have to answer: number one, vector, rat flea; then natural host or reservoir, rodents; and then accidental host, humans. The clinical features of this plague are very important. Number one, and the most important clinical feature, is lymph node enlargement. Uh, the slide is again not visible.
हेलो, अरे एक्चुअली पूरा नेट कोलैप्स हो गया था, मैं डिपार्टमेंट में ही हूँ, मैंने अपना ना पोजीशन चेंज किया है, नाउ आई एम इन सेमिनार रूम, सो प्लीज टेल अदर्स टू ज्वाइन, ठीक है, नाउ वेयर इज पीपीटी। हेलो,
Yes, sir. Anish Tayal this side.
extremely sorry, Anish and all
No
students.
problem.
Now I shifted somewhere else in seminar room, so the full net connection is here. I'm audible to you all.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
My voice is clear.
Yes, your voice is also clear.
Okay, okay. So please, extremely sorry for delay. Now we are starting our. So we were discussing about this. We are starting with our introduction. So Anish, are you there?
Sir.
Okay. Okay. My voice is clear, so please start your PPT and start your discussion.
Yes. So you all might be
Anish?
eager to know who is this deadly organism possessing one of the biggest threats to mankind. It is a bacteria known as Yersinia pestis. So three important questions: who is its vector? Vector is rat flea, natural host or reservoir rat or rodents, and accidental host humans. So we are here going to discuss some of the clinical features. The most important clinical feature is lymph node enlargement. In one of the type of plague, we see enlarged lymph nodes, usually in the inguinal region and sometime in the axillary region, known as buvae. Second clinical feature is fever, as it is a common bacterial infection. And the third is shock, which can progress to death. Sir, next slide, please.
Okay.
Next, we are going to discuss morphology of the Yersinia pestis. Very important point about it is that it is a gram-negative cocobacilli. What do you mean by cocobacilli? Cocobacilli is the shape of bacteria intermediate between the cocci and the bacilli. It exhibits a lot of pleomorphism in the sense that it can exist in single, pair, or chains. Moreover, in 3% NaCl media, which is unfavorable for its growth, it can exist either in club shape or in cocoid shape. Next, some of the characteristics are that it is a non-sporing bacteria, meaning that it does not form spore, and it is also non-motile. One important MCQ question is that it show bipolar or safety pin appearance on the Weisen stain. If we look into the bacteria in the 9 o'clock position.
Sorry, I am interrupt you. What are the other bacteria or other organisms which shows bipolar staining? Anyone, please? Apart from
Yes, sir, Francisella.
Francisella and
sir, Pasturella organism.
apart from these. Okay. So there is a one question examiner frequently asked in Viva, differential diagnosis of bipolar staining. Please write this and out. Okay. Proceed, Anish.
Yes, sir. So what do you mean by bipolar staining? As you will be seeing in a bacteria 9 o'clock position, this bacteria takes more stain over its end, which gives it a safety pin appearance. So next slide, please. So what are its cultural characteristics? It is a aerobic or facultative anaerobic bacteria. Optimum pH for its survival is 7.2 and optimum temperature is in between the range of 2 degrees Celsius and 45 degrees Celsius. Both of these conditions are available in our body, so it infects it may also infect us. One question, anyone can tell me the use of blood agar? 10 seconds to answer. Okay, so blood agar is
okay.
हाँ,
So basically, blood agar is enriched media. So it's basically used to culture organisms.
Moreover, we can say that blood agar differentiates bacteria on the basis of their hemolytic property into three groups: partial hemolytic, complete hemolytic and non-hemolytic. It is a non-hemolytic, it produces non-hemolytic colonies in blood agar. So you might be expecting that its colonies have a pale or colorless appearance, but it is not the case. Its colonies have dark brown color due to deposition of a hemin pigment in its outer cell wall. Similar is the case with the MacConkey agar. MacConkey agar used to differentiate lactose fermenting and non-lactose fermenting colonies. Let us revise one thing. MacConkey agar is for serum. Which media serve the same purpose for urine? 10 seconds to answer.
Clad media.
Yes, absolutely right. Clad media. Let's get back to topic. In MacConkey agar, it produces non-lactose fermenting colonies. Similar as the case above, its colonies should be pale or colorless, but due to hemin, the colonies are dark brown in color. In the ghee broth, it gives an inverted selectite or inverted cone appearance. Basically, selectite is a stone having the shape similar to cone, inverted cone. Okay. Next media is a
stalactile is basically the where you see in most of the caves in the Himalayas, there is an inverted cone-shaped appearance of ice, which is downwards from ceilings. So that is called stalactile. So there is a stalactile formation from in ghee broth media. There is a downward or inverted appearance of cone-shaped. This organism Yersinia. That's why it shows stalactile appearance. Okay, Age, please proceed.
Thank you, sir. One another media highly specific for Yersinia pestis is Syn agar. Syn agar containing Sapsulodin, Igresin, and Novobiacin. The fifth media is Cariblair media, which is used when we have delay in transport. So in total, we discussed 5 media: blood agar, MacConkey agar, ghee broth, and Cariblair media and Syn agar. Let's talk about its biochemical reactions. This bacteria is catalase positive and oxidase negative. For gram-negative bacteria, we do IUCT test. IUCT test meaning indole test, urease test, citrate test, TSI test. Indole, citrate, urease, 3 of these tests are negative. For TSI test, it produces alkaline or acidic colonies without producing H2S. Okay. So in total, if we revise, only one test is positive, catalase positive, rest all tests are negative. Sir, virulence toxin only slide. This slide is the most important slide of my presentation. The most important virulence toxin which you all must know is fraction 1 antigen. This is a capsular protein. And what is its function? It inhibits phagocytosis by macrophages. From this, you may be able to conclude that it is very, very essential for its virulence. Since virulence proteins are constant in all the bacteria of same species, so it is highly diagnostic for Yersinia pestis and is used in ELISA also. Next virulence toxin is phospholipase D. Phospholipase D basically imparts Yersinia ability to survive in the gut of rat. Next is lipopolysaccharide. ये तो बड़ा easy to recollect है कि lipopolysaccharide gram negative bacteria तो उसके अंदर तो होगा ही ना. So what is the function of lipopolysaccharide? That is the endotoxin of this bacteria. Next is hemin pigment. Hemin pigment, as we already discussed, impart dark brown color to its colonies. Since it is a gram-negative bacteria, so it must have a secretion system to secrete this protein outside. So it is a type 3 secretion system, which has 2 important functions. Number 1, secrete fraction 1 antigen, and number 2, secrete hemin protein in the host. The second last is adhesin. Adhesin, as the name suggests, it imparts ability to adhere or adhesion to the host cell. And the last one is siderophore. Siderophore sequesters iron. Now one question. What is the function of iron in phagocytes? 10 seconds to answer.
Fenton's reaction to produce free radicals.
Yes, absolutely right. So if the bacterial protein sequesters iron, so the phagocyte will not be able to produce free radical. So this siderophore proteins help in the survival of the bacteria in the phagocyte. Okay. Now the summary slide. Yes, sir.
Okay, so it is as you suggesting a summary. It is basically gram-negative Coccobacillus, bipolar on resin staining, and fraction 1 antigen is there. So thank you, Anish. Our next presenter is Bhavya, roll number 42. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Bhavya, please start your presentation.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Okay, guys, just like a brief introduction about myself, you must be knowing I'm Bhavya Bhava, 42, presenter for 31 to 60. So can we go to the next slide?
Okay. So we will discussing, Bhavya will discuss this thing, pathogenesis and epidemiology of plague.
Yes, sir.
First slide,
Okay.
epidemiology.
Yes, sir. So before moving ahead, like I just like to tell you that, plague is one of the greatest killer known to mankind, as Anish already mentioned the very first line of this whole lecture. Now, why exactly is, the previous slide.
Okay.
Yes. So why exactly is it the greatest killer known to mankind till date? Well, the reason is that there are two conditions that I'll be talking about in epidemiology, that is pandemic and the current situation in India. So first of all, can anyone tell me what is the difference between pandemic and endemic and epidemic? Is anyone aware of these three words? I know you guys must be.
Pandemic spread all over the
Anyone student?
pandemic is
Good question.
Okay, assuming that no one of you wants to answer or does not know.
Just like COVID-19 is involving whole plate. Okay.
pandemic is spreaded all over the globe, while endemic is restricted to a particular area, like a small area, or epidemic.
Okay, give some example.
Just like कि जैसे like एक let's suppose एक एरिया है, तो just like कोई सा भी एक एरिया, तो उसमें अगर पर्टिकुलर एक डिजीज है, जस्ट लाइक डेंगू ले लेते हैं एग्जांपल में, तो अगर उस डेंगू के हर साल हर साल टोटल केस आते हैं 10,000, एंड लाइक हम तो 3-4 साल का एवरेज लगा के हम नेक्स्ट ईयर क्या एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं कि उसके 10,000 केस ही आएंगे, लेकिन अगर उसके केस बढ़ जाते हैं नेक्स्ट टाइम, मतलब जो एक्सपेक्ट किया था उससे, तो दैट डिजीज बिकम एपिडेमिक, एंड इफ दैट डिजीज इज स्प्रेडेड ऑल ओवर द ग्लोब, just like COVID-19 has spreaded all over the globe, then it will become pandemic.
Classical example of endemic is goiter, which occurs in some Himalayan regions.
Yeah.
Okay. Bhavya, are you okay with this answer?
Yes, sir, it's perfectly fine.
Okay. So
okay, guys. So sure, thank you, sir. So the point that why is it the deadliest disease? Because till date there hasn't been any disorder, disease, syndrome, whatever you want, but there hasn't been any such thing till date. Just ke teen pandemic which have been recorded in the history, and the biggest pandemic that was seen, it was basically in the first pandemic, that was Anno Domino 541, which killed nearly 100 million victims. Now, why I call it as the biggest pandemic? Because in AD 541 the population was so less, and unme se bhi 100 million were the victims, which means it was such a grave condition that it wasn't been able to keep under control. Second pandemic happened in the 14th century, that is when it was called as Black Death, because that was the first time when people realized that, because of hemorrhages, and as Kriti already mentioned why it's called the Black Death, that was the first time when they realized that, okay, it's causing some blackish discoloration because of the lymph node involvement and all that stuff. And the third pandemic happened in 1894, which started in Hong Kong, China. Now, guys, the important thing which I want to tell you here to all, all those who are research geeks or all those who are interested in history or in ecology, that all these pandemics though they were caused by Yersinia pestis, but the biotypes that were involved in either of them, they were totally different. Now, can anyone tell me what do you mean by a biotype? Like if anyone has heard it before, if anyone wants to give it a try, kisi ko tukka maarna hai, you've got some time, just give it a try, give it a shot. Does anyone know what a biotype is?
Please answer Bhavya's question. Any of students? What is a biotype?
It is just like a एक मतलब ग्रुप होता है ऑर्गेनिज्म का जिनका जेनेटिक जो कंपोजिशन है वो सिमिलर होता है मतलब एक जैसा ही होता है.
No. This is not the answer. Please, anyone? Any student want to try more?
A group of organisms belonging to same species but having a slightly different antigenic proteins.
No. That is antigen जहाँ पे आ गया वो तो serotype से related होगा ना.
That's serotype.
Biotypes means having the similar, those two strains of same organisms which is differ from each other on the basis of biochemicals. These are known as biotypes. Okay, Bhavya?
Yes, sir. Sir, I'd just like to add, it's basically involves all of, sir mentioned, biochemical and also the physiological properties. Yes, sir, correctly said that. And so I won't tell you exactly what biotypes were involved because I want you to go and read the book. But can anyone tell me if you've read it before that how will you differentiate the biotypes of Yersinia pestis, or how exactly, scientists को कैसे पता लगा कि Anno Domino 541 में ये biotype था, 1894 में ये biotype था? Is anyone aware that how can you differentiate two biotypes, 2 or 3 or whatever?
This MALDI-TOF, it's a rapid accurate identification system which can be used for Yersinia pestis.
Okay, what is in that rapid test system? Could you elaborate a bit, please?
It consists of 3 things. I don't exactly remember the whole principle, but it's basically consists of 3 things. There's an enhancer, and then there is it's a matrix assisted laser desorption ionization time of flight. So on the basis of the different time of flight, we distinguish the different biotypes. That's all I know about.
Okay, that was a good try, Kriti, but I don't know. I mean, you might be correct, but I haven't heard of this other than malaria because I haven't read about this in Yersinia. So that's a very simple test that we do for Yersinia ke biotypes, that is glycerol fermentation and nitrate reduction. Now, depending upon kaun glycerol ko ferment karta hai, nitrate ko reduce karta hai, we have different biotypes. Then some of them can reduce nitrate but does not ferment lactose or does not ferment glycerol. We have another biotypes. So on the basis of these 2 things, that is glycerol fermentation and nitrate reduction, we have biotypes. Now, I think what Kriti was trying to mention was that the instrument in which we do. So I am not aware of that, but thank you, Kriti, for that as well. Moving ahead, what is the exact current situation of Yersinia in India? Though we are not really sure, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the seasonality that is in North India and South India. So because, in North India, we have fluctuations of temperature and the fluctuations of the climatic conditions. The North India is having seasonality, and plague is basically seasonal, which occurs in, a certain type of a season. However, in South India, because they have, a typical temperature and weather and climatic conditions throughout the years, hence Yersinia pestis is perennial there. So can we go to the next slide?
Yes. Okay. Are you able to see the next slide? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So what are exactly the epidemiological factors? So पहले तो कोई मुझे simple शब्दों में ये बताए epidemiological factor होता क्या? I mean, it's a very basic thing, but we really need to know that how do we differentiate between the vectors and epidemiological factors? So 5 seconds, because I don't think that's a big thing. Can anyone tell me epidemiological factor होता क्या है?
Factors which determine the presence of bacteria, presence of a pathogenic organism in a region.
Exactly. So like, we talked about कि ये certain reasons में था या वो था, that, but why it was there. Now, as I mentioned, it had pandemic, which means initially these things like, Yersinia, fleas, and rodents, they were present like everywhere. But now that we talk about seasonalities, as it was found out by the scientists, and with due course of time, it was found out that Yersinia requires a certain temperature which is close to our body temperature. It requires certain virulence factors, certain weather conditions, and with time it started evolutioning itself into a better Yersinia form, because as we all know, survival of the fittest by Darwin. So that's why the present flea, or you could say the present rodents, or the present vectors that we see today, they are certain to certain conditions, and those factors are in front of you. So the reservoir jiske andar, you could say, reservoir kya hota hai, jiske andar bhara pada hota hai. So reservoir are the rodents, and the most common, I would say, gerbilis, that is field mice. The vector is rat flea, as also mentioned. Can anyone tell me the scientific name of rat flea?
Please hurry up. Rat flea scientific name is?
Guys,
Xenopsis.
Yes, Pragya, could you repeat it?
Xenopsula.
Yes, that's correct. So Xenopsula, and the most common, you could say the most efficient, I would say, and the most efficient vector or the species of Xenopsula is Xenopsula Chiopus, which gave rise to Chiopus index. And if the Chiopus index in a population is more than 1, which is a very, highly epidemiological factor for the growth of rat flea and Yersinia. So again, Chiopus index. Is anyone aware? Because this is not in our books. So किसी ने research किया हो या किसी को पता है what Chiopus index is?
Number of rat flea to the there's a ratio of the number of rat flea to the rat. Like if it's more than 1, then there's a chance of an epidemic.
Yes, correct. So basically, we take 4 indices for flea. That is the total flea index, Chiopus index, specific percentage of fleas, and burrow index. But I'm not going to tell you about all 4, because the most important one, that is Chiopus index. Now, that's basically the average number of Xenopsula Chiopus, that is rat flea per rat. Ki ek rat mein kitni flea present hai. Now, even one flea, even one Xenopsula, which is the most efficient, it's such an efficient vector कि अगर एक भी present होगी, which can create havoc. But having more than one, it will create such a big havoc that will lead to such a big pandemic, or you could say a grave condition. Hence, Chiopus index more than 1 is a very good epidemiological factor. And at last, we have the mode of transmission. So the mode of transmission of this could be from 4 things. That is biting of the infected rat flea. That's the most common one. And I think that's the only one we've learned so far. You could have direct contact with the tissues of infected animal, or you could droplet inhalation from person to person, leading to pneumonic plague, and bite of an infected human flea, which is the most rarest form. Now, this is just an overview of the pathogenesis, talking in detail in the next slide, but to just tell you that, there are 3 types of plague. That is bubonic plague, pneumonic plague, and septicemic plague. Well, what happens is that, there are 2 cycles for this Yersinia. That is called sylvatic cycle and the urban cycle. I'm not going to waste more time. I'm just going to directly tell you what a sylvatic and an urban cycle is. Sylvatic cycle is when the flea is, being passed upon. Like, you play badminton. The badminton mein kya hota hai? You're cocking out the shuttle between the two players. Similarly, here, Yersinia, just saying Yersinia is a shuttlecock, and the flea as well as the rodent, these are the 2 rackets. So it's, having a to and fro motion between the rat flea and the rodent, which is called the sylvatic cycle. And what is the urban cycle? Urban cycle is a so-called vector cycle in which the human become an accidental host. By chance, rat flea ne kaat diya and hamare andar gadbad kar diya. Now,
okay, so ये कब होता है भव्या?
Yes, sir.
When this urban cycle specifically or wild sylvatic cycle occurs, there is some any event during which the human becomes accidental host. Maybe
so there was.
Maybe
like, are you talking about the blocked flea?
Yes.
So what happens is that generally Yersinia, it it replicates inside the gut of the it replicates
No,
inside the gut of the flea in the
I'm
proventriculus to be specific.
I'm talking about that condition in which human become an accidental host. How that in at what conditions these happen? These happened when flea infected accidentally to human while deforestation or during fire in the wild or during earthquakes when there are cracks and rodents keep out and dwelling the these human populations or come in contact with the human population or human dwellers.
Got it,
Hello.
sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I want one more question to Bhavya. You are explaining very nicely. How will you calculate this क्योपिस इंडेक्स? कैसे पता चलेगा कि एक रेट पे कितना फ्ली है? ये कैसे कैलकुलेट करोगे? Okay, you are this is the calculation, mathematical calculation. Okay, QRPS index is more than 1, but how will you count in a particular rat? How will you count the rat flea? What is the common procedures used by epidemiologist? Anyone, not only any students can try this.
Is it Schwann's method?
Normally, in India, epidemiologists use kerosene oil. Just they put kerosene oil or like 8 to 10 drops of kerosene oil on a rat, which is or dead rat or any rat which is kept in a cage. Then after 8 to 10 drops, we just put on rat. All fleas will, they will emerge out from rat surface and go somewhere else. So then we will calculate the QRPS or rat flea, and then we how many fleas are there on a particular rat, and via this method we can calculate the QRPS index. Okay, it is quite detailed, not necessary for you guys. Okay, carry on, please. Next.
Yes, thank you, sir. So this was the urban and the sylvitic cycle. And in the urban cycle, it's just like, the flea bites and then everything happens, which I'll be talking about in the next slide. And there could also be the airborne transmission in which, the aerosols or the droplets exhaled by the person who's already having that will be inhaled by another person, leading to pneumonic plague. Now, this is a picture which I think it's from, so the next slide. So can we go to the slide number 15?
This is slide number 15, I think.
Oh, yes. Thanks. Yes, sir, it's visible. Okay, so what happens is that, when infected flea, it bites the organism. So let's say that, whenever anything foreign comes inside our body, so what happens? Who's the first line of defense? Innate immunity. And innate immunity, we have phagocytes as well. So macrophages and neutrophils are the two phagocytes, which will take upon the onus that, okay, something foreign's entered the body, we need to kill it. Now, what happens is that the neutrophils and the macrophages, they reach the site where, they inject, basically, the flea is injecting those things into the skin. And once the phagocytes, it is neutrophils, as well as the macrophages, they reach the point where there's Yersinia. So neutrophils, they engulf it and by the help of endocytosis. Now, what happens is that generally the Yersinia is, if you see anything, it's not able to survive inside the phagocytes because of certain factors, and the most important being the myeloperoxidase, the ROS species which are produced. However, as we talked about the siderophore, which helps in the acquisition of iron, since there's no production of the ROS, and there are many virulence factors that Anish already talked about, so they help it to survive inside the neutrophils as well as macrophages. Now, generally what happens is neutrophils are still able to kill this Yersinia. However, because of the factors, it's able to survive. Now, then comes the role of macrophages. Now, there's a process which is called efferocytosis. Is anyone aware what is efferocytosis? Does anyone know what efferocytosis means?
Okay, let's proceed
Frustrated
because we are.
Okay, so efferocytosis is mainly that, you know, the macrophages, they come and they eat up the neutrophils, which are already infected. Now, see, a very beautiful thing happens. Since the Yersinia is able to live inside, you know, the neutrophils, it's passed on from neutrophils to the macrophages. And the macrophages, you know, they're a very important component of the ARIAs, that is the reticular endothelial system, and, you know, the lymph nodes and all, because macrophages are one of the APCs. Now, what happens is that macrophages ke andar Yersinia aa gaya. So from there, it's able to survive inside. Now, there are two very important factors which play a role in it. That is called as the fraction 1 antigen, which is basically released from type 3 secretion system, as already talked about. And it is preventing the formation of phagolysosome, which prevents the eating up of the, you know, the Yersinia by the phagolysosome inside the macrophages. And secondly, some researchers recently have found that, you know, all these things, they lead to the production of another cytokine, that's interleukin-1 RA, that prevents the, you know, the attachment of interleukins to interleukin receptors. Now, interleukin-1, it's a very important, we all know, an inflammatory mediator that, you know, recruits the T cells and then leads to a whole cascade of immunity. However, this interleukin-1, since it's not able to bind, hence there's anti-inflammatory, and finally, you know, Yersinia wins over the macrophages. Now, this Yersinia, then after going inside the macrophages, and, you know, once the macrophages, they burst, or if they go inside, somehow they reach, you know, the local lymphatics, and from the lymphatics, they reach the lymph nodes. And as already talked about, the lymph nodes, they cause tension, tenderness, swelling, and hemorrhage in the lymph nodes, leading to formation of buboes. That is why the name called bubonic plague or Black Death. Now, what happens is that it can lead to the lymphadenopathy as well. Now, the most common organisms involved, the most common organs that can also be involved in Yersinia are lymph nodes, spleen, liver, and lung. So why spleen, liver? Because again, they're part of RAS and the immunity, and the macrophages could go there and they could lead to lodging there as well. But it can, you know, if it passes on to the lung, as we talked about earlier in the previous slide, in the lung, it's able to survive because of the same factors. And again, the most important factor that is important for this is our own body temperature, because Yersinia can, you know, survive at a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius or even more than that. Hence, that is a very favorable factor for it to grow inside the human body. And that leads to more TS3, that is type 3 secretion system increases, more fraction 1 antigen, more decrease of phagocytosis, more infection. And this is a whole vicious circle that takes place. So in short, it enters the body via biting of the rat flea. It evades the immune system by all the virulence factors and by, you know, preventing the inflammatory mediators. From there, it leads to the lymphatics, because macrophages, obviously, they're passing through the lymphatics. And from there, it goes to the lymph nodes, to the liver, spleen, and lungs. Once it goes inside the lungs, it leads to another form of plague that's called pneumonic plague. And when a person like this coughs or sneezes, then these particles, they come out in the, you know, in the droplets, and once inhaled, it can again lead to another cycle in another person. So this was like a total thing about plague. I'd be happy if you have any questions, and if not, then I think we're good to go. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bhavya, thank you so much. Now, please, next presenter. Ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please, your name.
So my name is Kriti Sethi.
Okay, Kriti. So your next presenter, your.
So I'm starting. All right, sir. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kriti Sethi, and I'm here to present on the topic laboratory diagnosis of Yersinia on behalf.
Sir?
Excuse me, sir. What? So I can't hear you very clearly. So I'll continue anyway.
You are Kirti. Yes, please continue.
So Kriti Sethi, yes, sir. So
yes,
the first step,
Sethi.
yes, sir. So the first step for any laboratory diagnosis is, of course, the specimen collection. So Yersinia is responsible for causing 3 types of plagues, as Bhavya mentioned. Number 1 is bubonic, number 2 pneumonic, and number 3 is septicemic. So now, depending upon the kind of plague, the different forms in which the specimen is collected. It's pus or fluid aspirate in the case of bubonic plague, it's sputum and blood in the case of pneumonic plague, and it's blood and splenic aspirate in the case of septicemic plague. Now, I'd like to explain the term buboes. They're basically enlarged dense tender lymph nodes, which are usually inguinal. Now, let's assume there's a delay in the process of specimen collection and culturing. For that process, we require a special transport medium, which is referred to as the Carey-Blair culture medium. So once we're done with the process of specimen collection, we move on to the next step. So that is culture method. So depending upon the kind of sample, if it's a blood sample, we're going to use blood culture bottles, which is basically brain heart infusion broth. And it literally is formed as a result of infusion of bovine's heart in brain. Moving on to the next slide, sir. If it's a lymph node aspirate, we have a variety of culture methods. For example, we have the blood agar, which is a nutrient agar. And we have the McConkey agar, which is a differential agar, and we have the nutrient agar. The important point to be noted here is that because Yersinia is non-fastidious is the reason that it is able to grow on nutrient agar. While McConkey agar is very useful for differentiating between the gram-positive and the gram-negative bacteria, because it is not going to let the gram-positive bacteria to grow, and Yersinia is a gram-negative bacteria. So can you move on to the previous slide, please? I was not done yet. So can you hear me?
Yes.
So the previous slide, yes, sir. So the picture that you see right here is basically blood agar. You will observe 2 things here. So they're going to be brown colonies, and that is because of the presence of the hemin pigment. And the second point is they're going to be non-hemolytic. They're non-hemolytic because they don't produce any hemolyzing enzyme that causes the hemolysis of the surrounding RBCs. So next slide, please. So next slide. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so this is basically Yersinia on the McConkey agar. So previous slide, sir. So yes, so basically what you see here, if you look closely, you'll observe the presence of pale colonies. Now the question is, why are they pale? Because Yersinia is non-lactose fermenting. If it was lactose fermenting, you would have observed pink colonies. Next slide, sir, please. So change the slide. So can you please change the slide? So can you hear me?
Now I'm not able to find that option. Otherwise, you are able to change your own slide, but I'm not where this option
It's
comes.
okay, sir.
Slide.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
It's okay. So if the isolation is done from the feces, food, and soil, we would obviously require a medium that would selectively allow Yersinia to grow. So CIN agar is an example of that kind of selective medium, which will selectively allow the growth of species which cause yersiniosis. There are 2 species which are responsible for yersiniosis: Yersinia pseudotuberculosis and Yersinia enterocolytica. So, please. Yes, sir. So actually, okay, so you missed the slide. So this is you will observe within 24 hours. If you look very closely, you will observe that they're dark red magenta in color, and there is a surrounding pale area which resembles the eye of a bull, and thus they're named as the bull's eye colonies. Next slide, so please. So once we are done with culturing, we move on to the next, which is incubation. Now we will purposefully do it at 25 degrees Celsius and also at 37 degrees Celsius because it will help us in differentiating from most pathogens for which the optimum temperature of growth is 37 degrees Celsius. But for Yersinia, the optimum temperature for growth is 25 degrees Celsius. It also shows the feature of cold enrichment, which basically means that it shows enhanced growth when we incubate it in phosphate buffer saline at 4 degrees Celsius for 3 weeks. Next slide, sir.
So your next slide is direct microscopy.
Yes, sir. So when we're going to Grandstein Yersinia, what we'll observe is a high degree of pleomorphism. By pleomorphism, I mean there's going to be a huge variation in the shape. So the actual shape of Yersinia is cocobacillary, as Anish mentioned, which is the intermediate between the cocci and the bacilli shape. But under the grand stain, we'll observe, apart from the cocobacillary shape, there's going to be some bacteria which is going to inch more towards the bacilli shape, and there's going to be some bacteria which will inch more towards a cocci shape. So there's a huge degree of variation. Now, Weysen stain, which is basically methylene blue stain, will give us the characteristic safety pin appearance. If you look closely, you'll observe that the edges are more darkly stained as compared to the central pale area. So next slide, please.
Yes, yes. Any student, please mention any organism which is cocobacillus. I'm audible to all. Please, I'm asking this question apart from Kirti. No. Apart from Kirti, any student can answer this question. Any cocobacilli organism, bacteria which shows pleomorphism. Anyone? I'm audible to you all.
So you mean apart from Yersinia, some other organism?
Any organism, cocobacilli or bacilli, which shows pleomorphism, highly pleomorphic. Any
Haemophilus influenzae.
which is highly.
So Haemophilus influenzae.
Have you heard about? Yes, okay, but more pleomorphic than highly pleomorphic. Very common organism, provided you with culture plate exercise. Proteus, have you heard about organism Proteus?
Yes, a UTI कराता है तो.
हाँ, that is cocobacilli and that shows pleomorphism. नाम से ही उसके पता चलता है. Proteus means who can assume any. Okay, just like Greek god. Okay, continue please. Continue next. We are.
So, sir, I have to also mention the point that under the gram staining, we will observe that the bacteria is gram negative, it's capsulated. And yes, sir, now we can move on to the next slide.
Okay, next slide. Okay. Your next slide.
So once we are done with all of that, the next step is identification. Now, differential motility is a very important feature that we see in the genera of Yersinia, which help us in distinguishing Yersinia pestis from the other two species of Yersinia. It's seen that Yersinia pestis is non-motile at both 37 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius, while the other two species, which is Enterocolitica and Pseudotuberculosis, the motile at 25 degrees Celsius and non-motile at 37 degrees Celsius. So the slide is gone. Yes, sir. So yeah, like I mentioned, no, sir, previous slide.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So now then we have the classical biochemical test. So we have the catalase test, which is going to be positive, the oxidase test, which is going to be negative, and for the gram-negative bacteria, we have the ICUD test. So the I stands for indole test, which is going to be negative again. The citrate test will be negative as well. The urease test is going to be negative too, while the triple sugar iron agar test is going to show the result alkaline/acid. Now, let me explain it to you what this result basically means. It basically means is that Yersinia is able to ferment glucose but not lactose and sucrose. We are able to interpret this because if it was able to ferment more than one sugar, the both blunt and the slant, because there are two parts that the triple sugar iron agar test consists of. So if it was able to ferment more than one sugar, that is glucose, we would have observed an acid/acid result. But because it is only able to ferment glucose, we observe the alkaline/acid result. There is no elevation which would confirm the absence of any gas, and there is no black discoloration in the test tube, which would also negate the presence of hydrogen sulfide. Next slide, sir.
Okay.
So the slides are gone.
Okay, wait. Now you are
So
able
yes,
to see.
yes, sir. I can see them now. So the
Actually,
next
I am
step is
finding
logical
a
testing.
slide share. Sorry to interrupt you. I am finding a that slide screen, but it is not visible here. So that's why I'm again and again I'm changing slides. Screen sharing option is not there in my laptop. Okay, okay. Please continue.
Okay, sir. So the next step is serological testing. We will detect the F1 antigen, which is produced by the capsule of Yersinia. And we have different methods for the detection of the F1 antigen. So we have three tests. We have the immunofluorescence test, the ELISA test, and the immunoclonal antibodies. So the antibodies can also be used for the detection of Yersinia, but they're not great for diagnostic value. They're great for epidemiological studies, but not for diagnostic value. There's a reason why, because they take a significant amount of time to appear in the blood, which proves us to be not a very reliable factor for diagnosing Yersinia. But they're great for epidemiological studies because they're going to stay inside the blood of the person for very long periods of time. So for epidemiological studies, antibodies are great markers. So next slide, please, sir. I would like to conclude my presentation with molecular methods. We have PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction, which is going to basically target three genes, the F1 antigen gene, and the pesticin gene, and the third one is the plasminogen activator gene. We've already talked about the F1 antigen, how it is produced on the capsule by the Yersinia bacteria. We have the biotoxin gene. The biotoxin gene is basically a substance which is produced by Yersinia, which is going to inhibit the growth of other related bacteria. The third one is the plasminogen activator gene. So it's an outer membrane protease which is going to manipulate the fibrinolytic cascade in the immune system to induce bacteremia. But the problem with plasminogen activator gene is that its solitary detection is not enough for us to conclude that the person has Yersinia, because there are other species of Enterobacteriaceae which may also have the plasminogen activator gene. Thank you all for listening to me patiently. That's it, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Am I audible? So the attendee screen is blocking the PPT.
Thank you. Next presenter.
Yes, sir. Hello. Hello, sir. So you're not audible. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm audible to you. Please add the discussion portion.
Sir.
Yes,
Hello.
yes, I'm audible to you. Please start.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm here to speak on the very important topic of the treatment of plague and also, more importantly, the prevention of a disease that has literally plagued humanity for centuries. Next slide, please, sir. So coming to the treatment aspect of it. So when we talk about the treatment of any disease, the first visual that comes to our mind is a doctor coming in his white coat, coming with his medications, coming with a stethoscope, and coming to treat a patient. But on the very contrary, in times of pandemics, like even during the present pandemic that we are witnessing, we see doctors dressed up in the PPE kits, the personal protective equipments. So the picture that you can see on the on the right side of the screen is the PPE kit of a doctor during the medieval ages when the second plague pandemic hit the civilization. So yeah, it is very much contrary to the normal general idea of a doctor that we have in our mind. And as you can see, he's actually holding a stick so as to examine the patients from a distance, because bubonic plague kind of can spread even through contact, and he's also wearing a beak kind of a beak kind of an attire. In that beak is basically to prevent the spread of pneumonic plague, to prevent him from acquiring pneumonic plague, and also the beak houses some kind of medicinal herbs and some fragrant herbs which enable him to work in an atmosphere having very foul odors all around him. So this was just a fun fact and about the plague doctor, very much different from the normal idea of a normal doctor that we have in our mind. Now coming to the main part, the main treatment approach. So obviously, as you would have guessed, for any bacterial disease, the mainstay of treatment is going to be antibiotics. What is important is that these antibiotics need to be started early in the course of the disease, That's because if there's a delay in the treatment, the disease may further get disseminated to form secondary pneumonia and meningitis. Also, a bubonic plague may further proceed into a pneumonic or even a septicemic form, which is going to negatively affect the end outcome of the disease. So, hence, it's very much important to start the antibiotic course early during the treatment. So, next slide, please.
So next slide.
Yeah, now if we talk about the antibiotics, the main class of antibiotics that is going to be used is aminoglycosides. Just an overview about its action. Aminoglycosides are going to be protein synthesis inhibitors. They are going to bind either on the 30th or the 50th subunit or the interface of these subunits. And by binding to these locations, they are going to block the translation by causing a premature termination of translation, or they're going to incorporate incorrect amino acids, and hence they're going to affect protein synthesis in a negative way. So next slide, please. Yes, so amongst the aminoglycosides, there are two main aminoglycosides that are used in the treatment of plague. One is going to be streptomycin and one is going to be gentamicin. So in the initial days, streptomycin was the drug of choice for plague for the simple reason that it was the only aminoglycoside that had ever been discovered. And it was obviously discovered from Streptomyces griseus. So it was given for a period of 10 days for the treatment of plague. But nowadays, gentamicin has turned out to be the drug of choice for plague, and that is because gentamicin is found to be much more potent than streptomycin, and it also has a wider spectrum of action. So at present, gentamicin is the drug of choice. That's an important point to be remembered. So next slide, please. Yes. So coming to the other drugs that are used apart from aminoglycosides, we have a drug called levofloxacin, which is basically a fluoroquinolone. It is a DNA guidase inhibitor. And this can be used as an alternative drug for treatment. And it can also be used for post-exposure prophylaxis. The other two drugs that are used, sir, can you please show the PPTs or the PPTs?
Okay.
The other two drugs that are used are also protein synthesis inhibitors like aminoglycoside. One is going to be a peptidyl transferase inhibitor like chloramphenicol, and another one is doxycycline. It prevents attachment of the amino-acyl tRNA to the A site, and these can be used as alternative drugs. An important point to remember is that beta-lactams and macrolide class of drugs, which are important classes of drugs for the treatment of bacterial diseases, they are not recommended in the case of plague. That's because they are not much effective in the case of Yersinia. So the take-home message from the treatment point is that the drug of choice is going to be gentamicin, which is an aminoglycoside, which inhibits the protein synthesis. Now coming to the second part, the more important part, prevention and control. That's because always prevention of a disease is better than cure of a disease. So prevention is more important. Now coming to the strategies that are used for the prevention. There are three strategies that are followed. One is either you control the agent itself, that is either you control the direct vector, that is the rat flea, or you control the animal that is housing the vector, that is the rat. That is strategy number one. Strategy number two is you control the patients who have got infected. You control the patients and prevent the spread from the infected patients to healthy individuals. That's strategy number two. And strategy number three, as we all know, for prevention of a disease, we can use vaccines. So next slide, please. Coming to the details of the strategies, strategy number one is very simple. Either you control the reservoir of the disease, that is the rodents, by use of various rat killers or rat traps. As you can see here, Jerry getting trapped with a delicious piece of cheese that is kept, and he's getting trapped in the rat trap. So that is a very basic level of prevention. Or you can either control the vector, that is as an Opsala, by use of insecticides like DDT or BHC. So next slide, please. Yes, so this is the strategy number two, control of spread from infected patients to healthy individuals. So as we can see, even nowadays during the COVID times, it is very important for an early diagnosis of the infected individuals. And after diagnosing, you need to isolate the patient as early as possible and also treat the patient. So for isolation, we need to remember, we need to prevent contact for bubonic plague, and we need to prevent droplet infection from spreading for pneumonic plague. And suppose in the asymptomatic period, as we are seeing even nowadays, many patients are in the asymptomatic period. So suppose the patient has come in contact with healthy individuals. So for the primary contacts of the patient, we need to give chemoprophylaxis. And the drug of choice for chemoprophylaxis is doxycycline or levofloxacin, which are also used for the treatment. We can use these drugs for a period of 7 days for the primary contacts chemoprophylaxis. So next slide, please. Coming to the vaccines, one important point to be remembered is that these vaccines are not recommended for general use by the public. It is recommended only when a pandemic is suspected. That's mostly because these vaccines have many side effects, and hence it's not given on a daily basis. So there are two vaccines available. One is a killed one and one is a live attenuated one. The killed one is a formalin killed one, and it's interesting to know that it has been prepared in Haskins Institute in Mumbai itself. So that's an interesting point to know. So next slide, please. Now, just to end my presentation, I would just like to hint upon a lesson from the past, and it's important because this slide basically talks about the event of plague that took place at Hanoi, the capital city of Vietnam. And what's interesting about it is how plague actually arose in this city. So what happened was when the French colonized Vietnam, they used their modern engineering skills in building modern forms of sewage systems, and this was done with a good intention of improving the health and hygiene. But what basically happened was that these modern sewer systems, they actually served as a place for the breeding of rats, and also they helped in transport of the rats from one part of the city to the other. So it kind of gave birth to the event of plague in the city. And so the intention was good, but the outcome was a disease that has very severe consequences. So again, in order to bring an end to this event of plague, what happened was the officials, the administrators, they kind of started offering money to the workers who would present them with captured rats. But this again just led, the workers obviously grew greedy and they started breeding rats, and they started kind of importing rats from other cities. And this just aggravated the condition of plague. So this fact was just very interesting, and a lesson to be learned is that even if you have a good intention, you might the end result might not be that good. So it's important to remember that all that glitters is not gold. Yeah, that was all I had to present. Thank you, and extremely sorry for plaguing you with so much information. Thank you, sir. I'm done.
Okay. Next presenter, please. Subrat Jain. Subrat Jain.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible. So,
good afternoon. So can I start?
You are discussing.
Yes. Can I start?
Yes, but you start.
Good afternoon. I am Subrat Jain.
You are discussing other Yersinia species?
Yes, sir. So my topic is other Yersinia species, and so can you move to the next slide?
Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, sir. I am able to see the slides.
Okay.
So the two clinically important species apart from Yersinia pestis are Yersinia enterocolitica and Yersinia pseudotuberculosis. Now it's important for us to differentiate between these species. So basically, if we see motility at 22 degrees Celsius, Yersinia pestis will be non-motile, while both the other species will be motile. However, they'll be not motile at 37 degrees Celsius. This property is basically referred to as differential motility. Apart from that, we can do certain biochemical tests like the urease test, which will be negative for Yersinia pestis, but will be positive for the other two species. And we can also do a susceptibility to anti-plague phage, which will be positive in case of Yersinia pestis, while absent in case of other two species. So can you move to the next slide? Sir, am I audible?
Yes, I already changed the slide.
Okay. So now we'll be discussing about the geographical distribution of the Yersinia species. So Yersinia enterocolitica is worldwide, but is mostly common in northern Europe and America, while the Yersinia pseudotuberculosis, it's quite rare, and the cases which have been reported are... Yes, sir.
Yes.
And Yersinia pseudotuberculosis, it is quite rare, and the cases which have been reported are mainly from the Finland. Now talking about the serogrouping. Serogrouping basically tells us about the various strains of the species. So in case of the Yersinia enterocolitica, biochemically we have 6 biotypes. Now on the basis of antigen, the O antigen, we have 60 serotypes, of which the clinically infections are mostly caused by the O3 and the O9 forms. In case of Yersinia pseudotuberculosis, we have serotyping based on the somatic O antigen and the flagellar H antigen. So can you move to the next slide?
I already changed.
So it's not showing on the screen, sir.
Yersiniosis.
Yes, sir.
It is showing my screen.
So, okay, sir, I will carry on.
Okay,
sir.
okay.
So, Yersiniosis is the infection which is caused by these two species. It's a zoonotic infection, and it is more common with Yersinia enterocolitica as compared to Yersinia pseudotuberculosis. It's the reservoir is mainly the pigs, cows, birds, and wild animals. So basically, there is animal reservoir seen. Now, in humans, how do we acquire the disease? So it's by ingestion of the poorly cooked poultry, or the raw milk, or the unpasteurized milk, and even refrigerated meat can also cause this, because these causative organisms, they can survive in the refrigerated conditions, and it's mostly a self-limiting infection. So can you change the slide? Okay, so
now
the clinical
manifestations.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clinical manifestations involve invasive colitis. Now, here there is diarrhea with or without involvement of blood and mucus in the stool, and it is more common in children. Apart from that, the patient generally presents with a pain abdomen, and mesenteric adenitis can also be seen, and terminal ileitis can also be seen in some cases. Now, what is the important point here is that in certain in certain people, like the young patients, the old patients, the immunodeficient patients, or patients who are having excess of iron, there can be hematogenous spread of the disease, and it can present as reactive arthritis, erythema nodosum, and meningitis. Now, what is important here is, and normally it is a self-limiting disease, so no such treatment is required. Yes, sir. However, whenever there's a systemic spread, we have to give various antibiotics like aminoglycosides or tetracyclines or fluoroquinones. Talking about the laboratory diagnosis, so we can collect specimen like stool specimen, blood sample, or material which is obtained as a surgical exploration, and we culture the bacteria. So we can either culture it on blood agar, where we basically obtain granular translucent colonies with a beaten copper surface. Then we can also use a selective medium like McConkey agar. However, the best medium here is CI agar, in which we get bullseye colonies. Apart from that, we can do serological tests like antibodies can be detected using ELISA. Now, the important point here is, in case of pseudotuberculosis, antibodies, they appear early during the acute phase of illness, while in Yersinia enterocolitica, the antibodies, they are more likely to be found in the convalescent sera. This is basically a summary. So, in case of Yersiniosis, the clinical features are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, fever. Whenever there is a hematogenous spread, we can see reactive arthritis and erythematous nodosum. And management, it is mostly self-limiting. However, in hematogenous spread or systemic infection, we give tetracyclines, fluoroquinones, etc. This is basically an image of the CIN agar where we see the bullseye appearance of the colonies. And
Thank you, Subrat.
That's all. Yes.
Thank you, Subrat.
Okay, sir.
Next presenter, please, ready. So, laboratory diagnosis of this Yersinia other species more or less similar to Yersinia pestis. Okay, next presenter, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Yes, Vishal, please. Roll number 164. Your area was Francisella and Pastorella. Please discuss.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon. I'm myself Vishal Soni. I'm going to present on the topic of food SDL, like Francisella and Pastorella, on the behalf of roll number 169. So, we'll discuss one by one. First is tularemia, which is caused by Francisella tularensis. Francisella tularensis is the positive agent of tularemia, primarily a plague-like disease of rodents and other small animals. So, morphology की बात करेंगे, gram-negative bacteria, it is a pneumococcal bacillus, non-motile, non-sporing, capsulated है, stick aerobes है. As Anish has mentioned, septic inappearance on bipedestanic are also there. Features में हमें it is nutritionally deciduous, it is requires sustain to grow. ना coagulum medium पे grow नहीं होगा क्योंकि ये fast disease है. और ईस्ट एक्सट्रेट अगर कि हम इस पे बफर जो चारकोल है उस पर भी हम ग्रो कर सकते हैं इसको. तो कैटेगरी ए बायोटेरिज्म एजेंट भी था, इसे इसको कैटेगराइज किया गया है कि कैटेगरी ए बायोटेरिज्म एजेंट बिकॉज इट कैन बी इजीली डिसेमिनेटेड और ट्रांसमिटेड to 1%.
What are the other category A agent bioterrorism agents? Please, other questions apart from Vishal, answer this.
Yersinia
student. Yersinia, apart from Yersinia, category 1 bioterrorism agent. What we facing today is COVID-19 or coronavirus. It is a which type of virus? Yes, any student can reply.
So anthrax.
Anthrax, okay. And what about this COVID-19? What type of virus it is? Any student can answer.
SARS virus.
Okay, can any student tell me the purpose of bioterrorism? What is the purpose of bioterrorism? What is the purpose of using as a biomolecule or bacteria or fungi or virus as a bioterrorism? Why they use this organism as a bioterrorism?
Sir, because it can silently affect a huge population of people, and it will take time for people to even realize that something like this has taken place. So it can spread to more number of people, and hence the motive would be achieved.
Who is answering this?
So Pragya.
Okay, Pragya, you are a little bit close, but main reason is that the purpose of bioterrorism or purpose of terrorist activity is to create panic, maximum panic at a cheaper rate. Suppose any for terrorist, they need funding like Osama bin Laden or all these they need like ISI agent or the ISI funding agencies. But for using as a biomolecule or using as an organism for as a terrorism purpose, they do not need any funding. And for any molecule or any organism which can be used to create maximum panic at a cheaper rate in a general population. So that's why they use bioterrorism, because most of the funding agencies, terrorist agencies, they don't need any funding, maximum funding. Suppose they don't have any funding agency like ISI. So they go for this biomolecules, they go for organisms, they go for fungi, just like what happened in 2019 in Wuhan. They were, I think they were disturbing, they were creating some molecules, they were superimposed this coronavirus structure or their surface antigens with HIV. They were creating some type of different molecules. So from there, this virus, I think, released in Wuhan, this animal or market, and from there it spread throughout the world. So to create maximum panic at a cheaper rate, that's why they go for these biomolecules. Okay, continue please, Vishal.
Okay, sir. So, as the sir is mentioned, category A
Thank you,
bioterrorism
Pragya.
agent. So, category A bioterrorism agent के कारण इसको BSL थर्ड लैब में जो हमारी लैब होती है उसमें कैटेगरी इसको कल्चर किया जाता है. So, next slide please.
Next slide. Yes.
तो प्रेविलेंस की बात करेंगे तो द Francisella tularensis categorized into four subspecies. First is tularensis, politica, novicidia, and mediastica. Out of which the tularensis is most virulent, most common, right? So, and the first three species, tularensis, politica, and novicidia, found in North America, and the Francisella tularensis subspecies mediastatica is found in Asia. Disease की बात करेंगे तो it is inhibited in small animals like mice, rats, rabbits, hares, and muskrats. Mode of infection में it can be spread with infection of arthropods like pigs, deer fly, mosquito, maybe by reservoir hosts, which I discussed above earlier. Ingestion of contaminated water also, food, animal dead bodies, carcasses also, excreta, exposure of dead skin. So now we will discuss on the clinical manifestation. Tularemia is characterized by various clinical symptoms like ulcerative glandular tularemia, which is most common type. 78% cases में देखा जाता है. इसमें क्या होता है कि ulcerative lesions at the site of inflammation पे with regional lymphadenopathy देखी जाती है. और it can be characterized glandular tularemia, eye disease भी हो सकती है, oculoglandular tularemia हो सकती है. अगर inhalation aerosol का inhalation हुआ है तो pneumonia type भी दिख सकता है. Pharyngeal tularemia can also be characterized typhoidal type जिसमें हमें मलेशिया चिल्स like फीचर्स मिलेंगे. कॉम्प्लिकेशंस भी हो सकते हैं इसके, जो लाइक लिम्फ नोड सेपरेटेड हो सकती है, एक्यूट किडनी इंजरी हो सकती है, हेपेटाइटिस, लेप्टोमाइलासिस, एम्फाइमा एंड अदर थिंग्स, मेनिंजाइटिस, ऑस्टियोमाइलाइटिस एंड एंटीबायोटिस. लैबोरेटरी डायग्नोसिस में हम स्पेसिमेन कलेक्ट करेंगे पहले, जिसमें हम अगर अल्सरेटिव हुआ है तो उसमें अल्सर स्क्रैबिंग होती है, लिम्फ नोड जिसको हम प्रीफर करते हैं सबसे ज़्यादा. अगर ऑक्यूलर ग्लैंडुलर तुलारेमिया हुआ है तो हम कंजक्टिव स्वैब वो प्रेफर करेंगे. और अगर टाइफाइडल टाइप है तो हम ब्लड और बोन मैरो देखा जाएगा. कल्चर में हम आइसोलेशन करेंगे, इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट because it is a highly fastidiosus organism. So BCG आकार में हम ग्रो किया जाएगी इसको, जिसमें हमारा ब्लड सिस्टम जो मैंने पहले मेंशन किया था वो आकार में किया जाता है. अगर हमें स्पीसीज को आइडेंटिफाई करना है तो जो हमारा कन्वेंशनल मेथड थे ऑटोमेटिक बीटेक उसको यूज करेंगे. और एंटीबॉडी डिटेक्शन के लिए इम्यूनोफ्लुरेसेंस बेस्ड डायग्नोसिस रहेगा. सीरोलॉजी में हमारा एग्रीगेशन टेस्ट करते हैं, जिसमें हमारा अगर जो रेशियो होता है 1:160 रेशियो सिग्निफिकेंट है तो वो हमारे एग्रीगेशन टेस्ट पॉजिटिव कराएगा. PSR ऐसे में हम हमारे जो टू स्पीसीज है उसमें हम माइक्रो जो हमारे मेम्ब्रेन प्रोटीन्स है उसको डिफरेंशिएट करने के लिए यूज करते हैं. तो नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. हेलो, ऑडिबल सर? Yeah, you can see how the
ulcerative treatment. Yes.
Yes. You can see how the treatment. Yes, sir. You can see in these two pictures how ulcerative lesions can be manifested in thumb portion and in leg portion. So treatment पे हम जेंटामाइसिन देंगे इसको, ड्रग ऑफ चॉइस है हमारी. 7 से 10 दिन तक हम देते रहेंगे इसको जेंटामाइसिन, और अल्टरनेटिव के फॉर्म में हम डॉक्सीसाइक्लिन और सिप्रोफ्लेक्सिन देते हैं. तो नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज. Hello.
Yes. Next slide. Your next slide is ready.
It is not showing, but
Pasteurella.
1 minute, sir.
Pasteurella.
Yeah.
Pasteurella.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir. So the next one is the Pasteurella multiflorida, which is caused the disease of pasteurellosis. The Pasteur species are primarily harbored as a normal flora in the oral cavity of cat and dogs. So basically ये disease है जो cat और dog bite से होती है, जो हमारा एक वाउंड इन्फेक्शन क्रिएट करता है. मतलब वाउंड इन्फेक्शन मोस्ट कॉमन वाउंड इन्फेक्शन क्रिएट करेगा जो कैट और डॉग बाइट के आफ्टर दैट होता है. तो समटाइम्स कॉज फेटल डिसीज इंक्लूडिंग हेमरेज, सेप्टिसिमिया इन एनिमल्स आल्सो. तो पास्टुरेला मेडिकोइड इज मोस्ट कॉमन स्पीसीज इन्फेक्टिंग मेन. मॉर्फोलॉजी की बात करेंगे तो सेम ग्राम नेगेटिव कोकोबैसिलस है, प्लियोमॉर्फिक बैसिलस है, नॉन मोटाइल होगा, नॉन स्पोरिंग है. सेफ्टी पिन एपिडेंस सेम दिखेगा जो हमारे पीछे फैंसियोलिसिस में और हमारे यस्टिना में दिखा था. पास्टुरेला ऑर्गेनिज्म तो फिर ये मैक्रोमीडियम फिर से ग्रो नहीं करेंगे, इससे ब्लड आकार की जरूरत पड़ेगी. रिजर्वायर में ये नॉर्मली जो हमारे वाइल्ड और डोमेस्टिक एनिमल्स होते हैं उसके रेस्पिरेटरी और जीआईटी ट्रैक्ट जो हमारा फ्लोरा था वहां पर इन्वेट करता है. नेक्स्ट स्लाइड प्लीज.
Now clinical features.
Yes, sir. So the clinical features of the pasteurellosis is in, as I mentioned, Pasteurella multicolida is the most common cause of infection after dog and cat bite, right? So within अगर infection हुआ है तो within bite 24 hour of bite क्या होगा, जो कुछ फीचर देखे जाएंगे, सीवियर इन्फ्लेमेशन होगी, स्वेलिंग होगी उस रीजन पे, टेंडरनेस दिखेगा, फ्लूएंट डिस्चार्ज भी हो सकता है विद पेनफुल रीजनल लिम्फोडेपेथी, राइट? और लो ग्रेड फीवर भी रहेगा. और अगर कोई भी पेशेंट है जिसमें इम्यूनो डिफिशियंसी है या लीवर डिसीज उसको पहले से मैनिफेस्टेशन है या मेलिगेंसी है, तो बैक्टीरिया में क्या बैक्टीरिया हो जाएगा, उसके कारण से वाइड स्ट्रक्चर होगा लाइक निमोनिया, मेनिंजाइटिस और एंडोकार्डाइटिस। लेबोरेटरी डायग्नोसिस में हम ये ग्राम नेगेटिव बैक्टीरिया है तो मैंने बताया भी कि कल्चर मीडियम में इसको यूज किए जाएंगे, मैकोनिमीडियम यूज नहीं करेंगे, ब्लड अगार की जरूरत पड़ेगी इसमें। आइडेंटिफिकेशन के लिए ऑटोमेटेड मेथड हमारे कल्चर मेथड जो हम कन्वेंशनल मेथड यूज करते हैं वीटेक, और यहाँ पर मालदी ट्यूब भी यूज कर सकते हैं। ट्रीटमेंट में एक मेजर ग्रुप ऑफ कैटेगरी बीटा लैक्टम्स होते हैं, जैसे पेंसिलिन जी, जिसका कैटेगरी जैसे पेंसिलिन और एमोक्सिलिन फ्लेवोनेट इज आल्सो कंसीडर्ड एज अ ड्रग ऑफ चॉइस। थैंक यू। I am done.
Okay. So extremely sorry for the delay, since there was some problem with this